Balanced budget. Prince Charles. Old?
Never will be king.
His mom will outlive him.
Okay. Mahatma Gandhi.
Peace.
Peace.
Leadership.
Non-violence.
And violence. Okay. When I was getting ready to do this, I actually went and talked to the leadership of my company. And I said, give me some names, some people who you think are good and bad leaders. And those are 3 names that surfaced. And I won't tell you which they thought was bad. And so I started asking questions like, I said, one of the questions I asked him, I said, do you think leaders are made or born? About 50-50 people said some are made and some are born. That they, like the president of my company, she said she thinks leaders can be taught to be leaders. They can be imparted those skills that are needed to be leaders. And so I asked, okay, so what are some of the skills that they need? She says, the first thing out of her mouth is she says, they have to be honest and ethical people. Because think about it, like when I said Bill Clinton, the first thing that came out was sex scandal. Okay, that was the first thing that came out when I said the name. And that's gonna keep, that's every time history's going, his name's gonna come up, it's going to follow him. He did a number of other things in the world, in terms of his diplomacy, his domestic agenda. He did a number of different things, but the first thing that comes is that. And a lot of times when we look at business practices, usually the first thing that comes to mind to people is those things that go wrong in the business world. I get a lot of resumes that come across my desk, and right now I'm in the process of filling 2 positions. And I got a resume from, and one of the people on there was from a former competitor of ours. And I knew somebody who worked there at the same time, so I called the person up and I said, hey, can you tell me about so-and-so? And the first thing out of her mouth, she goes, I wouldn't trust that person. I wouldn't trust that person. So that resume ended up getting filed. And so ethics plays a very big important role within the workplace. Now, a lot of businesses, I was just talking as we were coming in, I was sharing about, the field I'm in healthcare in New Mexico, it's a very small community. There's a handful of companies that are involved in it. And it's really interesting because we kind of shuffle around in the company. My boss, I report directly to the COO, and she's worked with Presbyterian, she's worked with UNM, and she's worked with a couple of others. And now she's with Molina. And there's several people like that within our company who have kind of made the round, so to speak. And so what has affected some people to continue to move on has been their behavior where they're at. And one of the things I mentioned is the healthcare company, more and more, we're getting more and more regulated. And not only are we becoming more and more regulated, but the sanctions that go with those regulations are growing. One single violation can cost us millions of dollars. And in my company, if you cost us millions of dollars in sanctions, better make sure you have a box to put your stuff in right away. There's no second chances. And that's one of the things when you talk about ethics is that there are not a lot of second chances. There's that old saying, you don't get a second chance to make a good impression. It's the same thing when you're talking about ethics in the business world. To build a reputation back up after being accused of an ethical impropriety in the business world takes years. I read one place, it takes on average about 15 to 20 years to rebuild your reputation. And so, getting back to, originally when I was talking about leadership, I was asking, so I asked my plant president, my CEO, I said, so what else makes a good leader besides being ethical? They said, standing by your word. It gets back to being ethical. My CEO, she says, the one thing that I see you, she tells me, she says, makes you a leader, she says, if you tell me you're going to do something, I know you're going to get it done. On time, and to the extent that it is. And she said, that makes a good leader. She says, a person of their word is going to attract others to what they're about. And so she said that's one aspect. She said a good work ethic. We were just talking just before we started about a good work ethic. One of the things that I was sharing with Travis and with Mike is that one of the things I see is that some people coming out onto the workforce for the very first time are not really understanding the idea of a work ethic. There's an attitude of expecting everything for themselves instead of putting the effort into it. And so that's another thing that makes a good leader, is one who's got that strong work ethic. That's a part of it. And I said, anything else? I asked them, is there anything else that makes a good leader? They said, well, there's some that they're very charismatic and that makes them a good leader, but being charismatic does not make a good leader. But it helps. And the last thing they said that makes a good leader is one that isn't afraid to make mistakes. And I thought that's kind of interesting. Last weekend, I had the opportunity to attend TEDx in Albuquerque, and there was one of the presenters. He was, and it gets back to this earlier conversation today. He wrote video games, and he said that video games are the best example of leadership training. And I thought, the guy's crazy. He's played too many video games.
Makes a lot of money out of it.
And I thought, okay, this guy's crazy, let's see what he has to say. And one of the things he said is, video games teach people how to fail. I thought, that's bizarre. And then I got to thinking, how many times do you play a video game and you crash and burn and then you go back and you start over again? And you learn from whatever you did to crash and burn to get further down the game. Makes perfect sense. They said a good leader is one who's not afraid to crash and burn. That doesn't mean that you take major risks that are going to cause problems, but you're willing to try something new and be innovative. Those who are the best leaders and move their companies further down the road are those who are looking at new ways to deliver their product, or innovative ways to develop new products. And so it's that taking that risk to fail. And so I thought that was a rather interesting characteristic. So, I did not want to drag things out. So those are what I had in way of ethics and leadership in a short little questions, comments. Anybody want to disagree with me? I'd love to debate.
So Tony, along with your last point, doesn't a good leader also have to be able to make a decision?
Yes.
I mean, that's been one of my experiences, is that you get these managers that literally, they play it so safe that they never want to make a decision, because they never want to say they failed at something.
But there's a difference between management and leadership, I think. I think making the decision comes natural, if you're willing to take those risks and you're willing to develop that team that's going to support you on those things, the decisions come naturally. And there's a difference between managing and leadership. And it may take years to develop leadership skills. And you can learn management skills. There's all kinds of books in the bookstore if you want to go look at management skills.
On the topic of work ethic, an individual you mentioned that doesn't have that work ethic that you all were expecting. I think for the students, what does that look like? What is poor work ethic and what does good work ethic look like? Is it showing up first to work, leaving last? Is that all it takes?
It's more than just showing up first and leaving last. It's recognizing your role in the bigger picture. Try to how to say this without. I was sharing with them. We have a person on my team who this is his first job, and I mean first job in terms of a career. He did his bachelor's, went straight in to get his master's, and he's now in his first career job. And a couple of things that I'll tell you that he does that are kind of annoying is when he's given a project to do, he complains if it takes more than the time that he thinks it needs to go. He has some idea of how it is, and so when he's given a project, he complains because it may take, instead of 3 hours, it takes 6 hours. He thinks that he is ready to be a manager in the department. He's been on the job a year. He's always late. He's always late to meetings. And when he's in the meetings, he doesn't participate. So those are some of the things that are expected. And they're basic things to be expected. You know, if it takes more time than you think, you put in the time, get it done. I mean, I was always taught that you put in whatever time it takes to get the job done and get it done right. So, okay.
Just a question. Earlier, when they were talking about the networking session, talked about the question that was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's, from a leadership standpoint, that was a very pertinent question. I had the opportunity to attend the Center for Creative Leadership in North Carolina, sponsored by the Bix Corporation. And fundamentally, what they try to do is get you to understand that and to be able to answer that question. Because whatever you do in life has got to be consistent with that purpose that you're trying to be when you grow up, and aligning yourself to that purpose, and then everything falls in place. So how do you feel about passion for what you do as an individual as it relates to what you do every day?
Passion, I think, is a key component of what you do. Usually, you know, when people ask me, well, what is it that you do for Molina? And I'll start talking about Molina, and you'll see me get very excited and animated, because I love what I do. And then I start talking about our mission and vision of the company, and I get even more excited, because they're both tied together, and I can see a difference that I make. And so I think that's the other thing is if you're doing the job just because you want to get a paycheck, then you're doing the wrong thing. If that's the only reason you're doing it is just to get that paycheck, you're not doing what you need to be doing. I loved when Mike said that he would ask them different questions to get about to see where their passion and their excitement was, because you know that's one of the things that I look for when I'm trying to hire somebody. And like this particular employee I mentioned, one of the things that sold me on him when I hired him is I asked him a question about managing budgets. And so then he got all excited and he started telling me about his graduation party and how he had a little bit of money to say, and he got really, really excited about it. And so I could see that he could get passionate about something that he could buy into. And so it's being able to help him to translate that into, and I think he's got the potential to be a good leader as well as a good employee.
The other one, it comes from my culture teachings, Native American culture teachings, is that they tell us that in order to be a good leader, you've got to be a good follower. And there's a book written by John Marshall III called Power of Four, I think. And it's the leadership style of Crazy Horse, the Sue Lawyer.
Yeah.
And he talks about that a lot. And so, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I've heard of that book, and I've not had an opportunity to read it, but I've heard of this. It's a great book to read. It's my reading about that high. Because like right now, I shared with somebody earlier, we're in the middle of doing lean training. I'm trying to get my green belt, so I'm reading a lot of lean right now. So.
And you're going to do your MBA here. That's what your boss said. Your manager told us that.
The dean and Anthony came by to visit me, about a month ago? 2 months ago?
2 months ago, yeah.
They came by, we had lunch, and then I gave them a tour of our new facility. If you're not aware, Molina just relocated 800 employees to downtown Albuquerque.
Great facility.
Into a new building. And so I was giving them a tour, and so I introduced them to my boss. I report directly to the COO. And they mentioned the executive MBA, and so she turns to me, she says, "Don't you think that would be a good thing for you to do?" Her and I haven't had a conversation about that one yet.
We saved you a spot in the 2016 class.
So, but yeah, so that's what that joke is about. Is they're trying to get me into the executive MBA program.
I'm intrigued by what you said. Good leaders will take risks even though they may fail. Yeah. That's tricky to do. You've got to have a leadership team above you that's tolerant of that. And you know,
in some industries, it's a little bit easier to do than others.
In an entrepreneurial firm, it's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the healthcare industry, it's not as easy to do that, although the healthcare industry is moving at an unbelievably fast speed right now. The newest innovation in healthcare is telemedicine. And so that's where my industry is now beginning to take risks, hopefully in a good way. So if you've seen those commercials from United where the woman's dancing with her husband, she goes in flying, smashes him, that's telemedicine, where they were talking to the doctor on the computer.
Well, I wrote it down. The next time I meet with the president or the provost and they're talking about something I did that failed, I'm gonna shoot that one out. I mean, that's gonna just be shot out instantly that good leaders will take risks even though they may fail.
Don't tell President Carruthers where you heard that from.
I think it's a really good thing to ponder. I like that.
Yeah.
You know, I also had an opportunity to work with a guy who was a high-level Honeywell guy. And he basically says his attitude towards mistakes is that when you make a mistake, it's going to cost X number of dollars. And so he's more inclined to keep the person because he just invested money in him learning. So that doesn't happen again versus getting rid of the guy. I just spent a bunch of money training you. So why would I want to fire you? Because the guy was in there saying you can fire me today.
Well, it depends on how severe the mistake is. I mean, there's a few that you just can't, you don't have a choice. But Molina is we're now reworking our core values. And the second core value that they put in our new ones is honesty and integrity. And our CEO, who's the son of the founder, spoke to us at our ribbon cutting, and he said, "If you make a mistake, I want you to own your mistake," he told us. And so that's now at the core, one of our core values at Molina. So it should be interesting to see how it goes.
So you mentioned core values and institutional ethics. Is there a good way to be able to assess that from the outside as an applicant? I don't want to work somewhere that doesn't have.
Most, like ours are on our website. They're everywhere. We have them posted throughout the building on big posters. And what I heard that they're printing cards for us to have all on our desks, cubicles. So in our company, our core values are everywhere, and we have no problem with sharing them.
Yes, but
And
how do
others-
you
others we
evaluate,
don't.
I mean, when you said that, I remembered that Enron Corporation had on every floor of their building this, you know,
That's true. That's true.
this
That's true. I
values
hadn't thought about
that
that.
they did not follow. So how
And
would,
that was unethical.
I don't know if there's any clues as to.
I think it's a matter of talking with people. Like, if you come to Molina, everybody spouts it. And if you start observing people, you can tell that we live the values, the core values and mission of the company. If somebody doesn't, they don't last very long with us. Because every meeting we go to, it's drilled into us. Every time we do presentations and stuff, it's part of our discussion. The founders' children are still the leaders of the company, and they're the one thing they always say is, we're gonna keep following what Dad's vision was, and so they keep drilling it into us. So, but yeah, that's a good example.
One way we measure is that we do employee surveys, and we ask the employees, do you know your core values? And then we ask them whether you follow them, is the way to measure.
And a good way as an applicant is you just ask.
And a lot of times you'll interview, in our situations, we allow employees to interview applicants, team interview. And so you're able to ask that question of employees.
We're required to interweave our core values into our interview questions to judge if somebody would match well.
Adam, but I think it's a great question, because even if you do go into an organization, you get offered a job, you accept the job, one, more than likely, as Mike said, the job tenure in the Valley is, 2.5 years tenure, that's the average. Likely, that's not going to be your only job in your career, but definitely, if you find out that your core values, your personal core values, do not match with the companies based upon actions or activities that you see a manager do or things like that, I think you seriously need to question your longevity there, really, because you should never have your personal values, change your personal values to go towards the, I guess, unless it's, terrible personal values. You haven't them improved. But no, really, if you feel uncomfortable, because there was several people at Enron, and Enron's a great case, that they're very good people, and there were some things going on there that that they had possibly got themselves into a box. They have a mortgage, they're married, they have 2 kids. They could not possibly quit their job. Well, they could, but there'd be a lot of hardships. And so they lived with and accepted some of the things that were going on. So just keep that in mind.
And you can ask questions too. Do you have whistleblower policy? Do you have, all those kinds of things. And like with us, we're happy to say, yeah, we do. This is the process. We can share those kinds of things.
Let's move on to Paul.